study the philosophy of Krishna consciousness and to apply my intelligence to how to serve Krishna. But when it comes to appreciating Krishna's unlimited nature, my intellect will not help me. And that's really what Prabhupada said. He quotes this verse here, Atak Shri Krishna Namadi Nabhaved Kram Indra, which Prabhupada often used to cite. It's a familiar Sanskrit verse. I never actually learned it, but I think I more or less picked it up just by hearing it so often. Atak Shri Krishna Namadi Nabhaved Kram Indra, Sevam Mukhe Jivado Swayameva Spuratyada. And the meaning is that Krishna cannot be understood by the mundane senses. However, by serving Krishna, Sevam Mukhe, Seva means service. So Sevam Mukhe means to bind myself to Krishna through service. If I take that step, and particularly Seva Mukhe Hi Jivado, Jiva means the tongue, beginning with the tongue. This is when we start to take almost to sort of part company with philosophy, because by serving Krishna, beginning with the tongue, and Prabhupada explains that as being obviously chanting, but also eating prasadam. So there was that famous time, wasn't there, when Prabhupada was confronted with a group of Mayavadis, and they invited him in, this was in North India, and they invited him to come and give a talk. And he said, no, that's all right. He said, they are, speculating about the absolute truth, but we will go back to the spiritual world just by eating prasadam. And he popped a sweet in his mouth. It's a different level of truth, that by chanting Krishna's name and by eating prasadam, that's how we're going to understand Krishna. Sevam Mukhe Jivado Swayameva Spuratyada. In this way, Krishna becomes revealed. So there is a sort of something mystical happens. I know when I made it a practice very early on, I used to go into a lot of school classrooms. And it's always the same, It's pity I don't do it so much now. But I used to go into the school, dressed in a dhoti with a shaven head, and cause a complete riot in the 70s anyway. And the teacher would become the teacher who was sort of taking you around themselves became a celebrity, because they're taking around this kind of Martian, around the school. And so you'd be shown into a classroom, and it would just be chaos. The kids would be jumping up and down on the desks, frankly, in excitement and confusion, and also a lot of mockery went on, of course. So how are you going to communicate anything to this group? So, well, I discovered two things. One tip I can pass on: if ever you find yourself in an unruly classroom, and you want to try to establish some sort of line of communication with the group, then usually if you look at the back, you will see the troublemakers. There'll be 2 or 3 at the back, and what you can do is you can call out across the classroom and ask them their names. And because they've been put on the spot, all of a sudden, they become quite self-conscious. Although they're quite, they're very confident being dominating their group, but when they're singled out from a stranger, so they tell you their names, and then you invite them, please come and sit right in the front, and sort of make an example of them. They come to the front, and miraculously, I found this 9 times out of 10, the whole classroom suddenly sort of becomes ordered, because the ringleaders have, made a public display of submission. So that's one tip. But the other one, and the one I mean to say about, is that I discovered that if I ever, and sometimes it happened, that I somehow, had to begin speaking before I'd chanted. And I just got nowhere. Just couldn't make any sort of impression on the group. But and so I made it my practice. The first thing is I would chant. Maybe have one or two devotees. I might be on my own, or I might be a devotee with me, so kartals and mridanga or something. Or sometimes, of course, the tambura, which is a showstopper anyway. But to chant 5 minutes, and I wouldn't, personally, I wouldn't pressurize them at that point to join in, because that creates problems. But I say, if you like, you can join in, or you can just listen. And I would just say a few words. Try just listening to the sound of the mantra. Don't try to understand it. Just concentrate on the sound and listen while I sing. So I'd sing the Maha Mantra for 5 minutes, and two things would happen. One is everyone's attention would become focused on another level entirely. And the other is, of course, that I would be thinking while I'm chanting, what on earth am I going to say? And the words would just come. Krishna would just inspire you. If you're in that position and you don't know what you're going to say, or you're not certain, then you chant and the words will come. So that's the secret of Krishna consciousness. And then, of course, the other thing which Prabhupada taught us is that in that situation, always give prasadam. And I've never necessarily been particularly good at that, but I know some devotees are really good at that. One in particular, my brother-in-law, Siddhajaya. When he came to visit the temple, he was in 1970 or 71. He was earning a lot of money because he was in the computer business before anyone else was. He's French, but he was working in the city of London. He was making lots of money. But he noticed that the devotees had no money at all, and that they were begging in Covent Garden and just getting rotten vegetables to eat. And he actually saw, one day he went with Mondakini to help her, and he saw her sorting through the rubbish pile, at the Covent Garden market. They used to, the traders, when something just was past its sell date, or, was no longer saleable, they just dumped it, and every day, the food would be taken away. And one day he saw her actually sorting through the pile to bring cauliflowers or something back to the temple. So when he saw that, he ordered a delivery of potatoes, and an entire sort of lorry load of potatoes were delivered to the temple. And Prabhupada was there, and he heard about it. So he said, who was it that made that donation? They said, well, it was Serge. So Prabhupada called him to his room, and so Serge came in and felt suitably awed in Prabhupada's presence, and Prabhupada called him over and he gave him a sweet. And Prabhupada said something like, people may come to the temple and they may not understand philosophically, but if they have prasadam, then they will understand Krishna. And so he made it from that time on, he became a devotee of prasadam, in the sense of distributing prasadam. So that's our philosophy. Beginning with the tongue, we serve Krishna.